Well, welcome to episode 11 of Life of Leadership in Lorain County. I've got a special guest today that I'm going to introduce to you in a second. But before I do that, I want to thank my sponsors. First of all, I want to thank Brian Jankowski over at BCT Alarms, Alarm Service Center. If you have a need for home security, give Brian a call. If you have a need for commercial security or fire protection, give Brian a call. I also want to thank Renee and Gary Tolet over at WOBL WDLW. So AM 1320 and 107.7 is WOBL, and WDLW 1380 and 98.9 FM. And thanks for all the support that they've given me through the, so far through 11 episodes of this. So I'm going to introduce a special guest to you today, and we have Jeanine Donaldson. Jeanine, how are you doing today?
I'm doing better than I deserve, Bob.
That is, I love it. I love it. I love to hear that. Jeanine and I were introduced at a chamber event over at the shipyards, and she was just such a lovely lady who just the background that she has and her history in Lorain County. It was extremely important that I invite her on to talk about what she does. So Jeanine, tell us what you do, where you came from, and how you're living life.
So, Bob, yeah, you and I really just met, but I feel like we're kindred spirits, mostly because we're about the same age. But when you were talking about your podcast, I had actually read about it in the newspaper. I think there was an ad in the newspaper, and I read about it. So you and I engaged that way. But what you don't know about me, I'm going to tell you two leadership facts that you don't know about me. One is I am a founding trustee for Leadership Lorain County. Way, way, way back when it first started, before there were any best class of whatever, there was a board that used to meet at 7:30 in the morning and designed this program that we now currently have with Julie Cruz Blair as the executive director. So I go back in leadership in Lorain County a very long time. And another thing that you don't know about me is when I was in high school, I was a cheerleader. And that was before they had Title IX in sports. And so even though I was very athletic, I was a tomboy growing up, there was just no place other than being a cheerleader that girls could be physically active. And the significant point to that was I was the first Black cheerleader at Sandusky High School, where I grew up. And, we just can't undervalue youth sports. The skills and the training, the characteristics that I got from being a part of a sport, even though it was cheerleading, has just carried me through life. And so today I'm a very strong advocate of youth getting involved in sports on all levels and giving children the opportunity to be involved in sports. The YWCA just this past year collaborated with Eric Bowen. Eric started the T-ball league in South Elyria. And if you don't know where South Elyria is, it's where it's the African-American side of town, let's just say, where the Black churches are. And back in the 1930s and the 40s, it was very vibrant because the city of Elyria was vibrant and had middle-class families there, and you had youth baseball. And South baseball was a very active, growing concern. But for the past 20 years, that area of the community didn't have youth sports. And it probably goes along with not having the resources at the city when they have to cut back on resources. So that's one of the programs that we started last year was a T-ball league. And we had over 80 kids participating in a league, and it was just phenomenal. We had older folks that came back from as far away as Maryland and Georgia for opening day activities because they were so excited to revitalize that community, even with just something as small as T-ball. So, leadership matters to me. So I try to empower young people to be more actively engaged in leadership opportunities and even at my age, I look for opportunities to show leadership.
So talk to me about that. The first Black cheerleader at Sandusky. What kind of emotions did you go through? Talk about that.
Well, it was a big deal. And it's kind of still a big deal. When I go to Sandusky now, I'll have people that point to me and say, "You were the first Black cheerleader. We watched you at games." I mean, it's amazing. I know what it meant even for my family. For my family to have somebody that people were saying to them, "Oh, we know your daughter. We've seen your daughter." Um, the gentleman who is the superintendent of schools, Dr. Gene Saunders, he's the Sandusky superintendent of school, and he always reminds me of he was in the 8th grade, maybe even the 5th grade. I don't know, but he was a youngster, and he lived close to the stadium where the high school games were being played, and he was just because at that point in time, African Americans didn't have a lot of prominent positions in the community, and something as small as cheerleading. And frankly, when I was a child growing up, I had 3 older sisters. And the one that was the next oldest to me was 5 years older. So she and I were never in schools at the same time. She was always older than I. But she is the one that kept telling me, Black girls can't be cheerleaders. Black girls aren't cheerleaders. That's for white girls. So that was always in my head. But I also had other folks telling me, you can do whatever you want to do. So I chose to listen to that voice.
Yeah, that's awesome because from a leadership standpoint, I was reading an article about Larry Doby Jr. today, and to be the first Black American League baseball player is so significant. This is the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson. I mean, these are some amazing things, and you're right on the forefront of that. So, for the county, I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for you. We talk about be comfortable. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and I would assume that you were a little bit uncomfortable at first.
At first and every day, Bob. They call African Americans and other people of color the minority, and that's for a reason. I mean, there really isn't a setting outside of like my church community where I walk in where I am not the minority. If I go to a restaurant, I look around and typically there's maybe 1 or 2 other African Americans there. So that's something that's always there for me. And it's not a good thing because then you start becoming that person. You start becoming the minority. So for me and for the kind of work that I do in the community, the work that I do is for everybody. It's not for Black folks or white folks or Hispanic. It's for everybody. And so I have to remind myself that when I approach situations, when I'm in a meeting, I'm not the minority person at the table. I'm Jeanine Donaldson. I'm there representing the Y. I'm representing the community. I'm just like everybody says. I mean, all throughout history, we're told you can be whatever you want to be. And I believe that. So.
And that's an awesome mindset. And I'm assuming that that's the same mindset that you're bringing with you everywhere that you go.
I believe so. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
Right.
we're here at the YWCA. So regardless of what Y you go to, if you go to San Antonio, Texas, or Detroit, Michigan, Hartford, Connecticut, if there is a YWCA in that community, the mission is eliminating racism and empowering women. Now, I know there's probably a lot of folks in Lorain County who probably thought that mission was only because it's Jeanine Donaldson. Jeanine Donaldson's African American, so yeah, she wants that to be the mission. But that's the mission of the Y throughout the country. So when I bring up things about gender or discrimination, Bob, I'm just doing my job. That's my job to do that. And if my color weren't African American, it would still be my job to do that.
So let's transition into the equity program that you created, and why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, so what I like folks to know about the equity program. So first of all, you're hearing that word all the time, equity. equity, equity. In this country, we have been taught equality, equality, equality. And so what's the difference between equality and equity? Well, equality is giving everybody the same opportunity. And that's the American way. That's what we want, right? We want everybody to have the same opportunity. We want everybody to have the same resources. But the problem is that there are folks that don't need the same thing. Some folks have enough. If you've got enough, then why do you need the same as the folks who don't have enough? And so that's the difference between equity and equality. Equity means you look at everybody, you assess what their needs are, and based on their needs, that's how you provide the resources. So when we talk about the Equity Center, back in 2020, the YWCA approach, and this was of course after the George Floyd incident and after there had been several protests in the country. Folks were saying, what can we do? We don't like this America. We want to change some things. And so folks were passing resolutions declaring racism as a public health crisis. And the YWCA, not only here in Elyria, Lorain, but throughout the country, YWCAs were going to city councils and county commissioners saying, pass these declarations. And happily, my involvement was with the city of Oberlin, the city of Elyria, city of Lorain, and the commissioners, and each one of those bodies passed resolutions declaring racism as a public health crisis. So what the YWCA also said was, we are going to stand with you and help you actualize your vision. So that's what we've been doing for the past 14 months. We pulled together a group of key leaders, and those leaders are folks from Foundation, Tony Gallo, where you and I met with the chamber event. Tony's been on our calls for the past 14 months. Ryan Aroney from United Way, Dean Douglas from Lorain County Community College, and our co-chair is Cindy Andrews from the Community Foundation. And I'm missing a few names, but you get the point. They are the key leaders of Lorain County, and for 14 months, we have been working on what we're calling a racial equity plan. Well, that's what we call it, but that's what it is. And the idea is to look at the disparities in Lorain County, to document the disparities, and then also come up with recommendations of how we can do better, whether that's in community policing, in housing, in economic development. And so our plan is ready. Today is the day that we are going to deliver that plan to the Center for Community Solutions in Cleveland for them to eyeball it and critique it, so that when we present it to the community for Lorain County, we can say this is a plan that moving forward, this is how we're going to measure whether or not we're getting away from systemic racism in Lorain County. So not much work, but
well, congratulations. That says a lot about your desire. It says, in what impresses me is that this appears to be a focus of yours from the moment you stepped on that basketball court or the football field to cheer, and it needs to be celebrated. It needs to be celebrated. You are. Somebody once said this: if there's a problem and there's no solution, there's really no problem. You and your group. A lot of those names are names that I identify with are providing a solution. Now, how do we take that solution and get legs on it, and how does it get transported through the community, and how do we get community buy-in? How do we get participation? How do we open up eyes of guys like people like me, right? I'm Lorain County. I'm white. I've been white all my life. And my perspective is different because It's a different perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do we engage in that?
Through conversation, Bob. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but yeah, we're different, but we have a lot more things in common. I know that's a very trite thing to say, but it's true. But we have to, so what we've learned through this period that I like to call the post George Floyd era is we have learned that folks have different definitions of what race, racism, discrimination, stereotypes, bias, anti bias, all of these words. And I'm learning a lot of the words and the definitions myself. The area where I need a lot of help in is when you get into the kind of the gender things, when they're talking about gender normatives and LGBTQ situations. You know, I'm of the same age that you are, and these are, you know, this is changing the way we think. We have to think about what we were taught, evaluate how we feel about that, and I think as a community come together with what we consider the norms to be. But we can't do that until we're speaking the same language. You know, I like to kind of compare this to, now I wanted to tell you, first of all, the YWCA is not a faith-based organization, but Jeanine Donaldson is very much a faith-based individual. I couldn't be where I am without the help of the Lord. So I'll just
Amen.
put that out there.
Amen to that.
It isn't tied to the YWCA. However, we have had Christian in our name forever. But so when you look at some of these problems and you look at, we need to have the same vocabulary. You know, the folks in the Bible, they were scattered because they didn't have the same vocabulary. The Tower of Babel, right?
Yeah.
So how can we speak to one another if we're not speaking a common language? So one of the things that our center wants to do is have training so that we can understand what is meant when somebody says anti-bias or anti-racist. Yeah, but you also have to have kind of a willing spirit to do this work. And I think there's enough people out there. You know, we're not trying to convince folks who just are, you know, anti this whole what they want to think is a politically correct movement or anti-snowflake or whatever the labeling is that's out there. We're not trying to convince those folks, but we think over time people will be convinced because it's a matter of, Bob, your world has been greatly enriched because of the work that you do. So you're not the same Bob of 30 years ago,
That's
40 years ago. And so even when you're sitting at your Thanksgiving table with family members that are the same that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you can't tolerate the same kinds of conversations anymore. You can't tolerate the same kinds of language anymore. I mean, sometimes we look away and say, oh, that's just crazy Uncle Joe. But after a while, you got to pull Uncle Joe aside. So, you know, Joe, that's not just offensive to those people, but it's offensive to me. I don't like to use those kinds of words anymore. And again, it's like, I know, gosh, I didn't think I was going to be so spiritual on this call, but it's like using swear words. I mean, it's a choice. I mean, you can stop using swear words and cuss words. It's not that I don't know them. Oh, yeah, I know how to cuss. But in the person that I want to be and have become, I don't want to use that kind of language anymore. So that's what we're talking about here in Lorain County, is finding those folks who want Lorain County to be inclusive and dynamic in being inclusive. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'm going to write a quick note here, but going back to the first broadcast that I did this year, Life and Leadership in Lorain County, I had Mike Elder, who's the head football coach over at Avon High School, and he defined success this way. Success is loving what you do and loving the people that you do it with, right? Now, I'm going to take that, I'm going to spin it a little bit, go to my spiritual side. Faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. So how do we nurture? How do we grow? Because in that communication or that connection, there has to be a component of love. We have to love our neighbors in order for us to feel equal to our to our neighbors, right? We all have blind spots. We all have our own mindset, and unless we have love for somebody, it's really difficult to understand where they're coming from, right?
Very much so. And as you know, there are multiple kinds of love. So it's even defining what kind of love. And I guess we're talking about that filios love with the brotherly love
Right.
of community. Um, but gee, Bob, if you and I could find the answer to that, the Lord wouldn't need it. Plus, he doesn't need help, right? But I mean, you're asking some tough questions. So let me take you back to I said I wasn't going to go here, but so for the past maybe 6 years or so, the YWCA, through our anti-hate task force, has tried to convince the Lorain County Fair Board not to permit the sale of the Confederate flag at the fair.
Yep.
And when we entered into this, and the way we entered into it was a county commissioner went to the fair and he saw the flag and he said, we don't need this here in Lorain County. So then he comes to the Y because he knows what our values are. So we took up the banner, shall we say. But when we first started talking about how we were going to do that work, we didn't talk about, we're going to go out there and protest and we're going to, name call and shout and those kinds of things. We said over time, the battle would be won by changing hearts and minds. And so it's the same thing for trying to get folks in Lorain County to change their hearts and minds about diversity, equity, inclusion. People think that they have to give up something. If we embrace this, then I'm not going to have the opportunities for my children. Of course you're going to have the opportunity. There are so many opportunities in our country for everybody. And if you really do value what our founding fathers valued, and that was about what immigrants bring to the community, to the country. Just think of all the innovations and the folks. We shouldn't be shutting people out. We should embrace them and learn from them. And then usually they shut the door behind them. But no, we want, Lorain County is a great place to live. It really is. And it can be better. And we're just hopeful that there's people out there that agree with how we think.
Right on. Yeah. So, it comes down to what your task force, right? Your equity program task force,
steering committee. Yep.
Steering committee. How are you going to introduce what you have? Are you going to start with Oberlin, Elyria, and then Lorain County, the ones that you have already done some work with?
Yeah, we're going to start rolling out the plan after we get it back from the Center for Community Solutions in Cleveland. Start having some rollouts, and it would first probably be with municipalities, those municipalities that we worked with, and maybe inviting them all to a meeting out at the college so that they can see the plan. And then we'll invite nonprofit organizations, some of the key leaders that we're talking to now. Michael Dowd. Michael is the CEO of the Mars board here in Lorain County. There used to be a mental health board, and there used to be a board for recovery and addiction. Within the last year and a half, they've been merged. And so Michael is the new CEO of that. So what's significant about bringing organizations like the Mars board, like the Lorain County Health Department, LACATA, that's Lorain County Alcohol Drug Agency, are these folks hire a lot of people. They work in the community, and they are looking for some guidance in terms of when they want to hire new people or their policies. Because, when we're looking at equity, we're not really looking at people and saying, don't discriminate. Stop doing that. We're looking at the policies. So people in Lorain County can say, hey, I don't discriminate against people. I'm a good person. I'm not a racist. And Black people can be racist and stereotypes too. So I mean, we contribute to that too. Yeah, just in case you didn't know, I'm African. But it's a matter of the community taking ownership of some of these things and saying, how can we do this differently? Kind of lost my train of thought, so I'll come back to that though.
Okay. Here's the thing too, right? People think that they're going to lose something, right? And the mindset that needs to be developed is a rising tide raises all ships.
Absolutely.
So the more that we help each other, the more that we're helping each other, right? The more that we're all growing together. John Maxwell, author, leader John Maxwell, in his book 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, talks about the law of the lid, and he uses it. If on a scale of 1 to 10, your leadership capacity is a 7, nobody on your team is going to be above a 7, right? So we can take that same idea and apply it to the county. If we want to be 10s, we need to start being 10s. We can't be out for ourselves or out for our people or out for our side. We have to come together as a community and lift everybody up.
And we do have to recognize where we failed. So that was kind of the point that I had forgotten about, was that it's the policies. We're not calling individuals racist. It's policies and practices in the past that have contributed to why right now you can predict how a child is going to do by their zip code. And a lot of that was designed by people being fearful of other people with different color skins, not wanting them to live in the same neighborhoods as them. And we forget that this wasn't that long ago. A lot of this stuff that happened, Bob, it happened in our lifetimes. And frankly, it's still happening because we haven't discussed it. We haven't gone back and changed the banking laws or the real estate laws. I served on the Lorain Board of Education for about 12 years. And that's when I learned about certain practices that folks have in real estate. Some of the coded messages that they send about where to live. Like if you've got a company that's relocating to Lorain County, and they'll put up a sign that says Amherst Schools, or they'll put up a sign that says Oberlin Schools. Or they'll have real estate people that will only show them certain areas of the county. So this perpetuates that kind of thinking that there are others in the county where you don't want to live, or they don't care about their property like you care about your property. And, frankly, that's a hard stigma for folks to overcome. It's the kind of stigma that Mayor Bradley in Lorain has to overcome on a regular basis, or Mayor Frank Whitfield in Elyria. As much as they try to change the impression, the image, they're swimming against the tide that happened way back when those policies and practices were put in place.
Yeah, the saying was, you've come a long way, baby, right? So we have a long way to go. We have a far way to go, a long way to go. We take a look at Europe, and Europe has embraced this whole thought maybe even a century ago, right?
That's where all the jazz musicians fled to. They couldn't play in integrated clubs. Well, they couldn't integrate jazz clubs in America, but when they went to Europe in the 1920s and 30s, they were celebrated. There was no color line.
Yeah, we still have a lot of work to do, don't we?
Yeah, yeah, we do.
Well, I want to help you with that. I really do. I want to,
Hey
work.
Bob, hey Bob,
Yes,
don't say it unless you mean it.
I mean it.
And
Oh, I
people,
mean it. I mean it totally.
and people who know me know that I kind of remember that stuff. And you'll get a call from me out of the blue. Hey Bob, what are you doing? Want to come here? For example, the YWCA for the past, I think it's going to be almost 10 years. We have uh, coordinated the Juneteenth Blues Fest at Lakeview Park. So some folks would probably say, well, what is a YWCA doing with Juneteenth and the Blues Fest? Well, I see you got that book back there, Disruption or
Yes,
Yeah,
there it is.
yeah, there it is. So one of the most important parts of what we're doing at the center, but even before the center, because this is just regular YWCA work, one of the most important parts is to disrupt and change the narrative that has existed for 400 years about African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
You know the stereotypes. You
Yep.
know what that crazy Uncle Joe is saying, and you say, "Oh God, there he goes again." um, but it's those kinds of stereotypes that have perpetuated that African Americans are less than. Our African Americans deserve to have dehumanized or deserve to be dehumanized. And what else can you call it when you think about somebody dying because they had a knee to his neck? That's dehumanizing. And how do you get to that point? Well, you get to that point because folks have said over the years that, well, I don't even want to repeat a lot of the negative stereotypes that are out there. So when you talk about a Juneteenth celebration, it's talking about bringing the community together at Lakeview Park to see how African Americans celebrate what we considered our 4th of July. We've got two 4th of Julys. The 4th of July for 1776 and Juneteenth for June 19th, 1865. And so in bringing cultures together, even at something like a Juneteenth celebration, the Blues Fest at Lakeview Park, it's mixing cultures. Bob, you can bring your grandkids there. You can bring a lawn chair, sit in the lawn, listen to some great blues music, have your kids meet Abraham Lincoln, who is showing them how to roll a wheel down the road. He's one of my favorite people at Juneteenth is Abraham Lincoln. But again, it's creating environments where folks can come and not be afraid of Black people, that you can come and celebrate Black life the way other communities celebrate their life. The city of Lorain is an international city, but they've got like 86 different nationalities. So why wouldn't the African American community have a celebration of our community? So that's what Juneteenth is. And so if you tie that to the YWCA, why does the YWCA do that? And how will we continue to do that in our center? It's about disrupting that narrative. Any opportunity that we can, and it's a shame that we have to, in 2022, show people that we have African Americans that are architects or chemists, or it's sad that we're doing these kinds of things in 2022. But you got to disrupt. Got to disrupt. And there's a whole lot of disruptors out there. I'm not talking about African Americans. I'm talking about people who, like in the civil rights era, in the 1960s, it was white people, it was Jewish people, it was women, it was folks coming from the north riding buses in the south. And from that period of time to now, I think we had kind of the country that we had hoped for. What's happened? What's turned us in a different direction? I don't fully understand the answer to that, but I also know that I don't think we are fighting as hard to make America the America that we know it can be.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking. It's the elephant in the room, right?
Oh yeah.
It exists. It exists. Stereotypes exist. Racial inequality exists, and we don't talk about it.
Mm-mm. No, we don't. But again, that's my goal for the center, is that we can create a safe place so that I'm not embarrassed when I sit in a group meeting and say, you know what? I don't understand these pronoun things in the transgender and the LG. I don't understand it. I mean, so I can seriously say that in a group, and there'll be some folks representing that group that can say, hey, Jeanine, this is what that's all about. And they're not going to accuse me and attack me that, well, you should know that. You run a nonprofit organization and you're supposed to be teaching people to get over discrimination, but you don't know this stuff. No, I don't know it. I want to learn. Help me learn. So that's what we want our center to be. One of my very good friends, and my husband will be mad because he claims him to be his very good friend, is Judge Jim Maraldi. We met Jim. We live in Lorain, and Jim is a native of Lorain, and met him when our son, who is now 41, was 3 years old. So that shows how far back we go. And we were out to dinner a couple weeks ago, and I shared with Jim that he is probably our oldest friend in Lorain County. Not only oldest black friend or oldest white friend, oldest friend, period. But Jim was sharing with me that he recently saw a podcast, and it was called SCENE Radio, SCENE Radio. And the particular podcast that had a 14-show series is called Seeing White. So from that, him telling me that, it got my brain started thinking, because he said that is, and if you know Jim, you know that Jim is one of the most caring is the first word that comes to my mouth, but a person who doesn't discriminate, a person who is authentic. And so for him to say to me that he had to change his whole thinking after seeing that opened up a whole new conversation for us. And it's a conversation that now we're starting to think about, well, how can we let other people have this opportunity? And he also says he's an old white guy, like you know. But the thing is that I know who my audience is. And Bob, you know who your audience is. And Jim knows who his audience is. So we've got to get into those audiences and have these conversations. And no, it's not going to happen overnight, but we can see the results, you know. And so instead of people wondering, well, why aren't black people happy? You know, they should be happy. There's no slavery. I didn't have anything to do with that. Or, you know, the civil rights era took care of it. Or they're not being pulled over by the police because they're black. It's because, you know, I don't know what. But it's not about that. It's not about that. It's about, we want the same things. And when I say we, I don't even mean we as African American. When I say we, because Bob, I got a great life. Okay? Jeanine Donaldson has a great life. Don't think that I'm complaining about my status. I'm complaining about the status of other individuals. And I do know that there are kids in Lorain County that aren't getting the same quality of education simply because of where they live. I do know that there are people sitting in jails who are not getting the same sentences because some of it is as simple as they couldn't afford the right attorneys. They couldn't afford the attorneys that could get them off. So there are disparities out there. So when I say we, I mean we as a people, all of us as a people, we can do better. So that's it. That's what I got.
So okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk. So I came for a walkthrough of your building over there in Elyria, and I was taken next door to the house that you have there. Talk about that, right? There's some women live there, and
it's we call it the women's campus.
Women's campus, right?
And it's transitional housing, typically known as a homeless shelter. We've got 3 facilities where women at one house only accommodates single women. Doesn't mean they don't have any children. It means they don't have their children with them. They've either lost custody or they're given up custody of their children. And then the other 2 houses are for women and families. And so these folks can live with us for up to 10 months to a year. And during that period of time that they're living with us, we have case managers that work with them to find out what made them homeless and try to eliminate those barriers that made them homeless in the first place. It is something that the YWCA here in Elyria has done since our founding. Our YWCA was founded in 1913. And even in 1913, we provided housing for women that was coming from the farms to the big city of Elyria. And we provided them with, it was more like a boarding house at that point in time. So that's what we have for the housing here in Elyria. We have a building in downtown Lorain. And I know you're old enough to know where the telephone company is, Bob. So
Yep.
on 9th Street, right across from the telephone company, is the building that the YWCA owns. And we have 14 apartment units for women with disabilities. And in HUD speak, and HUD is one of our funders, disabilities usually means long-term former drug or alcohol or mental health addiction. So that's primarily the kind of women who reside in those 14 apartments. Occasionally we'll have somebody that has physical disabilities, but this is really women who are older and down on their luck and they have no place to go. And so at that facility in downtown Lorain, they can stay with us forever. So that's part of what the YWCA has done. And housing has been a part of the Y, like I said, since 1913. You were here during the daytime, but if you'd come after 4 o'clock, this building would have been buzzing with youth. We have a dance studio. It's probably the largest dance studio in Lorain County. We have youth from ages 3 to 18. We teach ballet, tap, jazz, and point. The Palace Theater is the only place big enough that we can have our recitals. And there again, that probably goes back to Jeanine when she was a cheerleader, right? Giving the opportunities. And when you think about it, when you've got, so our youngest dancers, it's called Tots Ballet, and they're like 3 years old. Can you imagine being on the stage of the Palace Theater at age 3 or 7 or 14? That's empowering. That's empowering. And so we look at our dance program for what it is. It's a sport. It's an activity that engages girls in something that we're not thinking that they're going to go on to be on the stage at the Met, but it is giving them an out-of-school activity that's going to keep them engaged in something so that, what happens with a lot of kids is that they get engaged in activities early on, after-school activities, whether it's smoking for the first time. And something as simple as smoking can lead down those roads where at some point in time they're going to be our clients in our shelters. And so that's what the dance program does. We try to prevent that and celebrate the young girls who are looking to go off to college and have a great life and come back to Lorain County.
Yeah, what a great experience, right? And I love, you've used this word empowering quite a few times. And yeah, just getting them on the stage empowers them, because other than that, they wouldn't know how to get on the stage, right? By being part of that community, they are now being able. And once you start opening up that door a little bit, it becomes wider and wider and wider, right? Once we engage with them as they move down their path or down the path, then they're able to open up more doors, and we empower them more.
Mm-hmm. And so, I don't like to put things in black or white situation, but that's the world that I live in. Okay, I'm just sharing my world. So for many years in our dance program, And if I had to give you, so our dance program is probably 80% white students and 20% students of color. And there were people who would say to me, well, Jeanine, you need more black kids in this program. And I even thought to myself, yeah, I need some more black girls in this program. But then I had to remember that not everybody has the same kinds of values. Not everybody has the same kinds of values. So when I would have conversation with some African American moms and say, we've got a dance program, they're like, okay. But that wasn't their orientation. So jazz, tap, ballet wasn't their orientation. Their orientation may have been, well, if we had a hip hop class for them, if we had praise dance, like the dance is popular in black churches for them. And all of these are very valid, but our studio was a traditional dance studio. So I'm happy with the 20% that we have. And we have alternative programming for families that want other kinds of things. But that's an example of knowing that people are different. And just because there is a black family out there that wants to put their child in a dance program or a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout program, it doesn't mean that they're any less African American or true to their own culture for doing these kinds of things, where oftentimes we even say, oh, that's just being white. And I don't frankly know what that means.
Yeah. Neither do I. So let's go. Okay. We've got, I don't know, we got maybe 10 minutes left here, maybe a little bit less than that. But you mentioned sports and how important leadership or learning leadership is in sports. Let's talk about that. Let me pick your mind about that for a while.
Wow, you would have to go there, wouldn't you? That's like one of my favorite topics.
All right.
My husband and I, we just love sports. We found out about each other from an early age. He is from Oberlin. I was a college student at Oberlin, and he was a townie. And I didn't know until after I left college and came to Elyria to work that people knew my husband. He was kind of like Larry Legend in Oberlin because he played baseball and football and basketball, and he was a tremendous athlete there. So maybe that's what's kept us together. But when you want to talk about that leadership aspect of it, so told you about me and cheerleading in high school. Didn't tell you about my daughter, did I, Bob?
You did not.
So my daughter went to high school at Lorain Admiral King, and it is a high school that is an urban high school. And she, early on, was able to do gymnastics because we could put her in gymnastics programs and we could put her in tumbling programs. But I think actually when our son played baseball, she would be, behind the stands doing flips and doing cartwheels and things of that sort. So we saw that, and she's not very tall. So we saw she has an interest in that. And so we put her in some of those cheer team things. Long story short is my daughter, Mallory, who now lives in Columbus, Ohio, and she is the CEO of the Commission on Black Girls and Young Women. When she graduated from Lorain High School, Lorain Admiral King High School, and by the way, she was in one of the first class for Leadership Lorain that took the high school kids in. So she did that when she was a junior in high school. But her senior in high school, she tried out for the Ohio State cheerleading squad, and she became an Ohio State cheerleader. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. So think about that, Jeanine Donaldson cheering back in high school. And fast forward to, I have a daughter who was on the Ohio State cheerleading squad, cheering 6 sports, and she was the first African-American captain of the cheerleading squad. So does it matter? Absolutely. Sports matters, leadership matters, and also to have family in your corner that understand these kinds of things and will make those sacrifices. It's not just sports. It's sports. It's the amazing thing. You can look at Black history and look at all of you mentioned Larry Doby, And then there's Jesse Owens and the millions of people that have been inspired by just those two individuals.
They've changed lives.
They've changed lives.
And we don't see the compounding of that, right? So here you are, the first African American cheerleader at Sandusky. You were empowered. You empowered your daughter, the first African American captain of the cheer team at the Ohio State University. You can see that, but you cannot see all the lives that you changed where somebody hasn't called up and said, "Hey, Jeanine, I just want you to know you changed my life." And then we take those individuals and the lives that they have changed as a result of them changing as a result of you. It just compounds so immeasurably.
It's the ripple effect. I think Robert Kennedy had a book called Ripples of Hope, where he put all the famous speeches by people like Martin Luther King and JFK and President Roosevelt. He put their famous speeches in because he believed that just dropping that one petal in the pond of water had that ripple effect, dropping it in the ocean. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think.
Hey, Bob, you're making me feel good about myself.
I'm glad, because you should. You're a life changer. You have set the bar, right? You are empowering others.
Mm.
You're using your ability and your gifts to change people.
I feel I need to invoke my mother here.
Okay, I want to hear this too. Yeah.
So she moved to Sandusky when she was 7 years old from Toccoa, Georgia, and that would have been in 1925. So she saw a lot of changes and stuff, but I rarely asked her, and this is typical of probably any Black family or any Jewish family or any families that have gone through hardship, immigrants coming. We didn't ask our elders about what they experienced. And I know I didn't, because it was too painful. I mean, just a little, and she wouldn't sit me down and tell me this stuff. It would be, oh, by the way, and when I was in high school, this happened. And I'm like, what? So the story for her is when she was in, I think, junior high school, because in Sandusky, all of the junior high schools had swimming pools, and high school had a swimming pool. Her memory was, and she considers herself a tomboy, is that when the kids had swimming classes at school, all the Black kids had to go to study hall, and the white kids got to swim. And that just struck me to my core, to think that somebody would treat my mother like that. So, I think that goes back to it too, that I try to make opportunities there so no child has to feel sorry for their parent.
Wow. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to thank my sponsors, and then I'm going to come back to you. And I just want you to close down this conversation. What words of wisdom would you bring in the last couple of minutes, just to tie a bow on top of our conversation today? All right.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. Give me a minute here, and then I'll be back with you.
Sure.
So I want to thank my sponsors, BCT Alarm, Brian Jankowski. If you have some home security needs, reach out to Brian Jankowski, 877-215-0763. And Gold Country, WOBL, AM 1320 and 107.7 FM. WDLW, AM 1380 and 98.9 FM. And for those people that live in Sheffield Lake or in Sheffield Village, Avon Lake, Avon, not next Friday, but the Friday after that. So let's see here, 18, 19, 21, 2, 3, 4, 12, let's say March 25th. WOBL, WDLW will be live at Amber Oak Restaurant, which is on Lake Road in Sheffield Lake. Join them. We also have a special leadership training going on at Lorain County Community College May 5th. get on Leadership Lorain County's website. You can find out all the details. We'd like to see you there. I may even make a special guest appearance. I'm not going to let you know for sure, but I may be. All right, Jeanine, we are back. So how could you put a ribbon on this this conversation that we've had?
The ribbon is, we are the people we've been waiting for. You know, yeah, we just have to tap into the power that already is within us. And I know that I'm privileged in terms of the job that I have, that I can be more vocal, more active in this area, but everybody has a role that they can play. And to now more than ever, today more than ever, we need folks to step up their game. Back to that sports analogy.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Jeanine, for being on, and can't wait to meet with you in the future and talk about some ways that I could help you.
Bob, thank you. This was a delight.